A few years ago, I watched two people walk into the exact same meeting. One person spoke first. He had the better resume, more experience, and objectively better ideas. The second person spoke later. Less experience, less knowledge, less preparation, and yet, when the meeting ended, guess who everyone remembered? Not the smartest person, not the most qualified person, the person who knew how to communicate. That moment disturbed me, because it forced me to ask a question that most people avoid asking themselves. What if success isn't just about what you know? What if it's about what other people can feel when you're speaking? Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Every day there are brilliant people being ignored, talented people being overlooked, hardworking people watching others get promoted, get opportunities, and get respect. And often the difference isn't intelligence, it's a communication habit. One habit. The habit that separates leaders from followers. And no, it's not speaking louder, it's not using bigger words, it's not having a deep voice or a charismatic personality. It's something much simpler. Leaders communicate with ownership. Followers communicate with permission. Now, before you reject that idea, let me explain. Have you ever noticed that some people walk into a room and speak as if they belong there? They don't ask for permission to have an opinion. They don't apologize for taking up space. They don't hide behind uncertainty. Meanwhile, someone equally intelligent says things like, "I don't know if this makes sense, but," or "Sorry, this might be a stupid idea," or "I'm probably wrong, but..." Sound familiar? Because I've done it. I remember giving a presentation years ago. I spent days preparing. I knew the material inside out. But the moment I stood in front of the room, something strange happened. I started shrinking. Maybe this strategy could work. I think this might be a good approach. I'm not an expert, but after the presentation, someone approached me and said something I'll never forget. "You seemed like you didn't believe your own ideas." That hurt. Not because he was wrong, because he was right. And that's when I discovered something fascinating about human psychology. People don't just listen to your words, they listen to your relationship with your words. Think about that. If you don't trust what you're saying, why should anyone else? This is the first lesson that separates leaders from followers. Leaders eliminate unnecessary permission-seeking language. Now, I'm not saying you should become arrogant. Arrogance is insecurity wearing expensive clothes. Confidence is different. Confidence says, "Here's my perspective." Insecurity says, "Please approve my perspective." Let's do a quick experiment. Imagine someone says, "This is probably a bad idea, but maybe we could try changing our marketing strategy." Now imagine someone else says, "I believe our marketing strategy needs to change, and here's why." Which person sounds more trustworthy? The funny thing is, they might have the exact same idea. The difference is ownership. And here's what most people don't realize. Every time you apologize for your thoughts before expressing them, you're teaching people how to value your ideas. So here's a challenge. For the next week, remove these phrases from your vocabulary. "I could be wrong." "This might sound stupid." "Sorry to bother you." And "just." Especially the word "just." "I just wanted to ask." "I just think." "I'm just checking." That tiny word carries a massive psychological message. My request is small because I believe my value is small. And that's not communication, that's self-erasure. But this raises an important question. If leaders communicate with ownership, where does that ownership actually come from? The answer surprised me. It comes from embracing silence. I know that sounds backwards. Most people think great communicators are great talkers. They're not. They're great pausers. Have you ever watched someone answer a difficult question and immediately start rambling? They're not communicating. They're escaping discomfort. I learned this lesson in the most embarrassing way possible. I was speaking at an event and someone asked me a question I wasn't expecting. Panic hit me. My brain started running at 200 kilometers an hour. And what did I do? I started filling space. Words, even more words. I was talking so much that I forgot what the original question was. Afterward, I watched a recording of myself. It looked like I was trying to outrun silence. Then I studied exceptional communicators, executives, speakers, negotiators, and I noticed something. When they were asked a difficult question, they paused. Not because they didn't know the answer, because they respected the answer. Silence is fascinating because insecure people experience silence as danger. Confident people experience silence as power. The pause before speaking says, "I'm thinking." The pause after speaking says, "What I said matters." And here's the beautiful part. You don't need to become more charismatic overnight. You just need to become more comfortable with 2 seconds of silence. Try it. The next time someone asks you a question, wait 2 seconds before answering. It will feel like 20 years, but to everyone else, you'll look thoughtful, calm, and confident. And that leads us to another communication habit that completely changed my life. Leaders communicate to connect. Followers communicate to impress. This one hurts because almost all of us do it. We walk into conversations trying to prove ourselves. We want people to think we're smart, interesting, successful, important. But have you noticed what happens when you're trying to impress someone? You stop listening because your brain is busy asking, "How do I sound?" instead of asking, "How do they feel?" I met a businessman once who could command an entire room without raising his voice. He wasn't the funniest person. He wasn't the smartest person. But after talking to him for 5 minutes, you felt like the most important person in the world. I asked him what his secret was. He smiled and said, "Most people enter conversations hoping to be appreciated. I enter conversations looking for something to appreciate." That sentence changed me because suddenly I realized why some people have magnetic personalities. It's not because they shine brighter, it's because they help others shine. Think about the people you love talking to. Are they always the funniest, the richest, the most successful? Probably not. They're the people who make you feel seen. They ask follow-up questions, they remember details, they react with genuine curiosity. And here's the paradox. The moment you stop trying to be interesting, you become more interesting because humans are drawn to people who make them feel understood. So next time you're in a conversation, try this simple shift. Instead of asking yourself, "What should I say next?" ask yourself, "What can I discover next?" One question changes performance into connection, and connection creates influence. But there's one final habit that separates leaders from followers. And honestly, I think it's the most important one. Leaders tell themselves a different story. Let me explain. Imagine two people walking into a room full of strangers. The first person thinks, "I hope they like me." The second person thinks, "I wonder who I can help." Same room, different story, different energy, different outcome. The stories we tell ourselves before we speak determine how we speak. If your internal story is, "I'm awkward," you'll communicate awkwardly. If your story is, "I'm not a leader," you'll communicate like a follower. If your story is, "My ideas aren't valuable," you'll hide your ideas. Your mouth cannot consistently outperform the story in your mind. And this explains why communication advice often fails. People learn techniques, eye contact, body language, voice control, but they never change the identity underneath. It's like painting a house with a broken foundation. Years ago, before giving an important presentation, I used to ask myself, "What if I mess up?" Now I ask myself a different question. What if someone in that room needs to hear what I have to say? Everything changes because communication stops being about me and starts being about service. Think about the greatest leaders you've ever encountered. Teachers, mentors, coaches, managers, friends. Did they lead because they wanted attention, or did they lead because they cared enough to contribute? Leadership isn't a position, it's a communication pattern. It's the willingness to speak with ownership, to pause with confidence, to connect with people, and to tell yourself a story that empowers you rather than limits you. So let me ask you something. How many opportunities have you missed because you asked for permission when you should have taken ownership? How many conversations have you rushed because you were afraid of silence? How many relationships have you weakened because you were trying to impress instead of connect? And how many years have you spent telling yourself a story that was never true to begin with? Because here's what I've learned. The gap between leaders and followers is often invisible. It's not talent, it's not luck, it's not intelligence, it's a habit. A communication habit repeated thousands of times until it becomes an identity. And the beautiful thing about habits is that they can change. Starting today, speak like your ideas matter. Pause like your words have value. Listen like the other person matters. And tell yourself a story that gives you permission to lead, because one day you'll walk into a room, you'll share an idea, you'll pause, you'll connect, you'll own your voice, and someone will leave that room remembering you. Not because you were the loudest person, not because you were the smartest person, but because you became the rarest kind of communicator in the world. Someone who stopped asking for permission to be heard and finally decided to speak like they belonged.